Well, hey, dads, and welcome to the Dad Nation podcast. My name is Jason Braun, co-host of the podcast and director of a ministry, global ministry called Dad Camp that is on mission to build stronger fathers who build stronger families. And we do so by creating epic father-child experiences. And so if you've never been to Dad Camp, you need to check it out at dadcamp.org. We dream of a world where every family has a great dad, and we are doing it in 12 countries now and 4 states. And so we're just really excited about what's happening in Dad Camp, and we are all about eradicating what we call the father factor, and that is this what we know to be true, that every social ill is can be linked or traced back to a weak, absent, or engaged father. And so that is our mission, vision, and passion to eradicate that and see a different father factor, one that we know when fathers are strong, families are strong. And so I'm here along with my co-host, Matt, Mr. Wisdom Crittenden. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing well, Jason. How are you doing today?
Good. This podcast is 4th of July weekend.
Yes.
So you got any big plans?
Yeah, I'll work.
You're going to work.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
If you don't know, Matt is an ER physician, and it looks like he's been given the holiday schedule.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I will try to not work on that weekend. But
yeah, you enjoy the weekend off. I'll be praying for no injuries, no bad injuries that weekend.
Yeah, we don't want a busy ER,
Mm-mm.
but probably will happen.
Yes, it usually does.
America gets a little crazy on the 4th.
Yep.
So there's been a lot happening in the Dad Camp world since our last episode. So just wanted to just quickly catch up the listeners on that. We've met with our connections in Dad Camp in Jamaica. They were actually here stateside, and so had a chance to meet with them. We've had a Dad Camp Haiti that was led by our amazing leadership team. They're doing a fantastic job. Right before the last episode, we had just got back from Guatemala, where we did, I think, 6 dad camps in 1 week.
Wow.
And then just now recently, we've returned from an extended trip in Ukraine, and we did 5 dad camps in Ukraine, and just reminded again of just how amazing God uses Dad Camp to just reach the hearts of fathers. And Matt, we actually had a chance to go to Ukraine together in 2019 and kind of get plant the initial seeds of Dad Camp there.
Right.
And so you weren't able to go this last trip, but it was so good to reconnect with our partners there, who they are friends now, and they're brothers and sisters, and to be able to just see the next phase of Dad Camp. And what was really exciting for me coming out of Guatemala and Ukraine is that we really feel like we've identified potential leadership in both of those countries to pass the baton to, so that just like in Haiti, that Dad Camps can be happening without our presence, that the only way to reach not just tens, if not hundreds of families and fathers, but to reach thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, is to pass the baton of leadership. And so we're really excited about that. Guatemala and Ukraine seem to be close to some of those things happening. So
awesome.
So lots happening in the Dad Camp world that we're excited about. In addition to this podcast, that is an extension of that ministry. And so we want to jump in to this month's episode. We are continuing to dive into this book, The Dad Difference, by Brian Loritz, and we are still in the beginning, almost parts of that book. The book's on the four most important gifts you can give to your kids, and we're still talking about the first of those 4 gifts, which is relationship. And so we started a few episodes ago talking about the power of presence, that being our superpower, and that presence is absolutely a foundational aspect of building relationship. with our kids. We talked last month about harnessing that superpower to build that relationship. And so this month, we are talking about how do we maintain relationship and even build relationship through times of what we are going to be talking about, temporary insanity.
Temporary insanity, yes.
Like those times when we are like thinking and looking at our kids and saying, what are you thinking? What is happening right now? And then how am I as a dad going to respond, react to these moments of temporary insanity, and being mindful and knowing that, no matter how much we nail this thing called fatherhood, that or don't, our kids are going to have moments of temporary insanity. It will
Absolutely.
happen. And it won't just happen once. It will happen many times. And so we need to expect it. And we need to really, really think about and understand how are we going to deal with this and deal with it well, because that's what allows us to maintain relationship through these kind of challenging and difficult times. And
Right.
and then by maintaining a relationship, what happens is we maintain influence. And we know that as our kids get older, that this gets tougher and tougher, because when they are demonstrating some of this insanity as they get older, sometimes those choices impact more people than just them, and the choices have more significance than when they're little ones. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And so, Matt, you've never been guilty of any temporary insanity, right?
Never.
Right.
It was very difficult for me to come up with any.
Yeah, I thought it would be. But you got to have at least one.
Yeah. So the funny thing was, when you brought that up, I thought, wow, the hard thing is going to be to narrow it down and pick one. There's so many different options. As my mom would say, I lost my mind multiple times during the time that I was growing up in her household. Um, I thought
Give us one.
Yeah, I'll just pick one. It's easy. We'll go with what I would call the drunk driving story. My junior year in high school, I made a very poor decision and was out with my friends. We had gone to a high school girls basketball game and drinking alcohol throughout the time that we were out and about, and then drove my friends home. And then I had this bright idea that I would go by and visit this girl. I think a lot of my temporary insanity stories could be like, this girl is somewhere in that story. And
pretty true for most of us guys.
Yeah. Maybe I would have made it home okay had I not taken that detour. But I ended up careening around a curve in her neighborhood and going off into a ditch. And got out of the car and was so disoriented that I didn't even know how to get to her house in the neighborhood. One of the homes that I was near apparently saw this happen, saw me toss a bottle of liquor out of the car when I got out of the car, and ultimately a sheriff's deputy shows up, and I am carted off to jail. So fear is gripping me at this point as sort of what consequences I'm going to suffer, more I think from my mom than actually from the law. And my mom shows up, and I don't know. I see her having a very animated conversation with the sheriff's deputy, and then I am released into her custody. And I just remember,
You weren't like, hey, I'll just stay in jail.
yeah, I thought maybe that might be a better option than to have my mom get a hold of me. But it was just like one of those things where I knew I had messed up. I knew I'd made a horrible decision, and the consequences. I'd broken the front axle of my car. I knew my mom was going to be really angry with me. And in this episode, we sort of want to talk about how we respond as parents. My dad wasn't present, and so he just wasn't really engaged in disciplining me. So I remember we'd have conversations when things like this would happen, and it would just sort of be like, mind your mom. What are you doing? What are you thinking? Do what your mom says. And that didn't really speak much to me. It wasn't sort of giving me any explanations of how and why and guiding me. And the other thing was, he was across the country. He's living in California. I'm in Indiana. So any threat of him actually sort of being able to follow through on something with discipline, I knew that wasn't the case.
So taking us back to the power of presence. He wasn't really present, so he had lost influence.
Right.
And so for him to be like him laying down the law, you were kind of like, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Great point. My mom, I just knew she was going to be fuming mad. I would get grounded. I sort of knew I knew what my consequences would be. But one point I want to bring up is just, I don't remember having an explanation of why my sinful behavior, why my temporary insanity was detrimental to me or maybe those around me, and sort of putting together what that meant in a more global perspective of my life, how it impacted my mom, how it could impact not just consequences here on earth, but my eternity as well. And so I just sort of thought like I'm a bad kid, right? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
bad, but I didn't have any sort of context to put that in
Okay.
based on, what I would hear from my mom when I got in trouble.
So I've got one to share, and we were kind of doing our notes for this on our own and didn't realize that we both picked a wrecking your
Wrecking your car
car
stories.
story.
Yeah, that was a
'Cause
coincidence.
So mine's a little different, but I did wreck my car too in one of these moments. And so for me, about the age of 8 to 10, so I don't remember exactly, but I think it was somewhere in that range. My dad said to me, son, if you kind of stay in line, don't give us any trouble, I will promise you a brand new car when you turn 16 years old.
Mm.
And that was motivating for me. And I think it did help kind of keep me in that, because I that was a huge promise. And so I I fulfilled that promise, and he fulfilled his promise. And at the age of 16, now it wasn't any car, like you can get any car you want, but it was a brand new car. And so I got a 1988 Chevrolet Z24. Now,
Zed.
yeah, not Z24 as we say in America. This is Canada, where we say Z24, which go Canada. I think I like Z better than Z, but
Okay.
that's a whole nother conversation. But
Yes.
I was in love with this particular car at that point. And so it wasn't long into the journey of independence and having a brand new car that was taking some friends to, actually we were heading to church for student ministry, heading down this one straightaway that I love to go on because you could just kind of put the pedal to the metal. And but again, not thinking, in that classic teenage stage of life, and it was raining, and so the roads were obviously wet, and I hit about 100 mile an hour, and I thought, okay, it's time to back off. And I hit the brakes a little, and my car skidded a little bit and kind of hydroplaned a little bit, and I instantly kind of freaked out, didn't know how to handle that. And the road ended in like a complete 90-degree hairpin turn. And so we were coming to that 90-degree turn, and I was skidding. And so I kind of panicked and stopped using the brakes and just thought, I'm just going to kind of guide myself. Well, I knew when we were getting there, I was going way too fast and navigate this 90-degree turn. And I saw this dirt road off to the side, and I thought, I'm going to pull off into that. So I pull off this dirt road thinking I'm just going to slow down onto this dirt road. We'll turn around and get back on the road. Didn't know that this dirt road ended also at a drainage ditch. And I pulled the Dukes of Hazzard moment where you're like, I mean, we were airborne flying across this thing. Thankfully, it had a little water in it. And when we landed on the other side I kind of bounced down and in, and it was a softer landing. And we ended up on the incline of this drainage ditch, just like a foot and a half in mud, like embedded, like car stuck, but
Oh man.
destroyed the underside of the car. I mean, it wrecked it. Thankfully, we were all okay. No injuries. But I'll never forget, like, this is pre-cell phone. There was no one to call. So we had to walk to a house and get on a phone. I had to call and so I got a ride to my parents' house, not to my parents' house. They were visiting some friends. So we got a ride to the friend's house and knocked on the door and called my dad and never forget that, because I thought, again, I'm dead. Like,
Yeah.
but what I remember about my dad, he never raised his voice. In fact, I never really felt anger from him, but I felt a ton of his disappointment and
Mm-hmm.
just his like, I can't believe like you made this decision. I can't believe you disrespected this gift that I gave you. And it just made me feel like the bottom of the barrel. But he was very firm and said, and the aftermath of that was, there'll be consequences, and this was your choice. This is your responsibility to clean up the mess. And so there was a lot of that, but I never remember him like, again, like yelling, screaming. He just kind of said, okay, this is your thing,
Yeah.
and you're going to deal with it. And so, um, that's just one story. And like you said, I could think of some others for sure. But I think we all have those stories of when we went temporarily insane, which I think hopefully for us as dads, it shouldn't surprise us when like our kids, they do this themselves, right? Like
Right.
they go temporarily insane, but for whatever reason, and I know it's true in my life, when it's happened in my kid's life, it still kind of catches me off guard. Like, I didn't see that coming, or
Mm-hmm.
like, what are you thinking? Like, and so if we don't prepare ourselves as fathers, our reactions and our response can be very damaging to our relationship with our kids. And so, um, uh, I know you've got some thoughts on this. And so, can you just, Matt, just speak to the importance of learning how to handle these moments well?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You mentioned preparation. I think we have to go through scenarios. We can never sort of anticipate all the things that our children will do in their temporary insanity, but it really helps me to start going through scenarios and thinking, how would I respond if Kylan did this? Or how would I respond if Ryan did this or Braden did this? And I think, a lot of times we respond in frustration and anger.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of, as dads, that tends to be our default when we're disappointed, when we're surprised by our kids' behavior. Um, I think sometimes we erroneously think our kids should know better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't tell you how many times it's come across my mind and thought, that was stupid. That was dumb. And I don't want those words to come out of my mouth because they're so damaging to our kids when they think we're calling them stupid or dumb. And we have to remember, I actually listened to an audiobook by an author, Meg Meeker. It's called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters.
Used it at dad camp a couple of
Oh,
times. Yep.
love that. Love that book. It impacted my life immediately and put some of those things into practice. But she brings up a great point. There's really these studies about frontal lobe, and your frontal lobe is what impacts your maturity, your ability to actually figure out action and consequence, to really think it through. And what her studies, the studies that she quotes, shows that most of us don't have that ability until somewhere between 21 to 25 years old. And the average is closer to 25. And so I shouldn't be surprised that my 10-year-old, my 17-year-old, even my 21-year-old doesn't have the complete ability yet, a maturity in those frontal lobes to really think through the consequences of their behavior, actions, and decisions. So if I operate from that place, I'm not surprised when the choices they make or their behaviors or actions look stupid or dumb to me.
Hmm.
It's just they don't physically have
Right.
the ability to make the good decision at times. And then the other thing that can fall to us as dads is we can think about our children's behaviors and actions as reflecting poorly on us, especially
Yeah.
when they're played out in the public square. Other
Yep.
people see, oh, your son did that. Your daughter did that, right? We have this feeling of like, oh, that reflects poorly on
On
me.
me.
We just have to realize we're not perfect parents, and we can do our best possible plan, carry out things for our children in the best way possible, and they're still going to make bad choices, bad decisions. They're still going to suffer from temporary insanity. And it is not a reflection on us.
Right.
They are human beings that make their own
The,
decisions,
right.
and we cannot internalize what they do and make it about us. Those two
Really good.
things: prepare, be prepared, it's going to happen, don't let their behaviors and actions be a reflection on you. It's not. And maybe that way we can not respond so much in frustration and
Really
anger
good.
when those things happen.
Really good. I know I've somewhat jokingly, but as my kids have got older, and we're having this disagreement or this discussion about something or a choice they made, I'll often throw out hey, the science, I'm just arguing with your dad here. Your frontal lobes just, you're not even going to get it like I'm.
Yeah.
And so I say, just remember, my frontal lobe's developed and yours isn't. So they love that. But
do they accept that?
The rolled eyes, the all that,
right.
But whatever, dad. Yeah, exactly. Whatever, dad. But how about handling the importance of handling these moments of temporary insanity well, or the importance of learning this when your kids are younger, and why that's so important?
Yeah, I just think the better we handle this when our children are young, the more likely they are to come running to us when they make poor choices and realize they're in a bind. And that's really what we want. What we desire is we want our kids, when these things happen, to say, man, I need dad. Dad's going to help me with this. Dad's who I'm going to run to. If we handle these situations repeatedly in a poor manner with anger, we lack grace, we lack mercy, or we use hurtful words, then their natural response in probably guilt, shame, fear is going to be to try to avoid us at all costs, to try to cover it up, and to try to run from us. And that's not what I want my children to do. And if we think about when they're young, when they're toddlers, 2 or 3 years old, I always say toddlers are a complete example that we're born with sin, because we don't teach them sinful behaviors, but they still sort of exhibit them regardless. When a 2 or 3-year-old makes a sinful decision, the consequences are typically not that great. But if you think about their decisions versus what a 16, a 17-year-old can do, me wrecking a car, I could have been killed in a car accident. I could have hurt someone else. We want, when our children are older, hopefully we've trained their brains to realize, hey, come to dad. Come to us for some guidance. Come to us for help. Just because the consequences of their temporary insanity can really be much more harmful. There can be much more severe, what I call collateral damage, when we make those decisions when we're older as opposed to when our children are younger.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really good stuff, Matt. I don't really have anything else to add, but I thought I would just quickly share, I think my dad really did this well when I was young, handled it well. And I don't know how he did it, because he certainly didn't learn it from his family, from his story. I honestly think it came through his relationship with Christ and his development of understanding grace and love. As that's the only thing I can attribute to. But my dad was very firm, but at the same time, he had this way of being grace-filled inside the firmness. And so I feared my dad, but I don't say that in a negative way. Like, I say that it was a healthy fear and respect of him. And so when I needed, I thought about when I needed correction, I don't ever remember my dad reacting like I expected him to. Like, oh, I'm going to get it, or he's going to lay the hammer down here, or because that's how I saw him. And I feared that about him. But in the moment when it was like, I've done something that needs to be corrected, or I need to be held accountable for, I honestly can't remember a time when he acted or reacted the way I thought he was going to react. Now, nonetheless, there were still consequences.
Right.
He was still very accountable. But in our home, there weren't, like today, there's timeouts. There's, hey, little Johnny, if you do that one more time, I'm going like that. In my house, I don't know about your house, but we didn't have the timeouts. There wasn't strike one, strike two, strike. It was strike one. We're going to talk about it.
Yes.
Like, it was choice, consequence. It wasn't, don't do it again. Don't do it again. Like, where the kid kind of becomes the CEO. It was, no, my dad and mom were the CEOs, and I was, a part of that. And so the expectations were set, and you either respected them or not. And if not, a talk was coming. So for me, honestly, I didn't really test the waters very often because of that healthy fear of my dad. Again, I think it was a good thing. And I think it kept me from a lot of pain and a lot of poor choices. But I was thinking about my parents' side of it, and like, you know what? I think it kind of made parenting a lot easier for them too by setting healthy boundaries and expectations as a young person versus, I guess, as I've been observing, observing families that haven't set those types of expectations or boundaries and kind of the chaos that ensues. I don't remember that kind
Yeah.
of that. My parents probably didn't have to deal with that a whole lot, and I think my wife and I have really tried to take that from she. I think she got that from her family too, and
Hmm.
I don't, I think in our home too, it's been a um, pretty non-chaotic kind of environment, even though there's been moments of temporary insanity, of course. But so the key in all of this, I think, goes back to this whole idea of of maintaining a healthy relationship. Like that is so critical. That's the gift, one of the best gifts that the book The Dad Gift says that we can give to our kids. And so you've kind of mentioned this already, Matt, but I heard this last year and it really rocked me. And in fact, we've done an episode, not in this podcast, but prior to that, we've done some teaching, and but I think it's perfect for this conversation. And it was this quote that just hit me when I saw it for the first time. And the quote was, "I messed up. Like, man, I messed up. My dad's going to kill me."
Hmm.
And then the next quote was, "I messed up. I need to call my dad." Like, I thought of that for a dad is like, or I thought about for myself, like when my kids mess up, what are they thinking? Is dad going to kill me, or I need to call dad?
It's
And
good.
you've mentioned that already. Like this,
Hmm.
if we do it right, like hopefully as they get older, they're gonna find us as a refuge, not as a my dad's gonna kill me.
Right.
And that just idea has really, really marked me in a way of my parenthood and thinking about how I'm reacting. And as I thought about scripture, I thought, well, that's the prodigal son story.
Yes, it
I
is.
messed up. And yeah, he knew that dad wasn't going to be happy for squandering everything, but he came home because
Hmm.
he said, I need to call my dad. And we're not going to get into that story today, but if you, because I'm sure most of our listeners are aware of the prodigal son story, but if you're not, go to Luke chapter 15 in the Bible and read that story. It's one of the most powerful stories, I think, in Scripture, and a powerful ways for us to understand the heart of the Father, the Heavenly Father, and as dads, the goal for us to the heart should be the heart of our Father. But I read recently a story about Billy Graham, who I think maybe is, in our day, has probably been a part of growing the kingdom of God more than anyone else in terms of
Absolutely.
just his evangelistic giftedness and the response and people finding Jesus because of his ministry. Um, and yet he has a prodigal story of it with his own kids of his own. And you think of Billy Graham, he was, I mean,
Right.
this is a guy like if I could be like someone, Billy Graham would be on one of the lists of like, I want to be like.
Yes.
But yet he had a daughter who uh, got divorced. And so again, I'm sure that the shame of that, of her being like, I'm Billy Graham's daughter, and I'm getting divorced. Like, what
Right.
a failure. Um, but it wasn't long after that if I'm sharing the story correctly, that she got into another relationship, and it was not a healthy one.
Hmm.
And Billy and his wife were like trying to do everything they could to be like, don't go there. Like, but she was kind of in a place in life where like, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do, what I think's best for me. And she got into this relationship, and it turned into be a really, really unhealthy relationship. And it left her in a really, really hard spot. And so she had nowhere to go but to kind of return home as an adult woman. And she shares then the story of she gets home, she pulls up the driveway, her dad is waiting for outside, and she's thinking, what is dad going to do with this? With like, what's he going to say? And she said, I got out of the car and I walked up to him, and his arms were just open wide, and he just embraced me. And she said, all he said was, welcome home.
Mm.
And she's like, because Billy knew there was nothing else that needed to be said.
Right.
And it was like she said, her heart just instantly started to heal, and they were able to then, that relationship was still intact, and they could work through some of these things and these pains that she was going through together. And it just reminded me, like, okay, Billy Graham's kids are struggling, gives me some hope, when my
Yes.
kids struggle, to not be too hard on myself, or,
Mm-hmm.
and remember, no matter how much we perfect the art of fatherhood, that our kids are going to go insane at times.
Yes.
And so it's more important for me to look inward and to develop myself and how I'm going to handle my kids' failures when they come, and to prepare for the hurt. I mean, there have been some moments when my kids have made some choices that really brought some hurt to them, to others, and it hurt for my wife and I. That it really hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But as their parents, like, we need to be prepared to not deliver more consequence and more discipline, but to be willing to take on our children's pain with them, to be
Yes.
willing to bear these burdens with them, and to walk with them through these things. To not, like, as the saying is, I messed up, my dad's going to kill me, to not kill them, but rather to be a refuge. And so, Matt, I'm going to kind of just turn this back to you as we kind of wrapped up this episode, just to kind of pull it all home, because I know you've you've got some more thoughts into this, as we've talked
Yeah.
about that. So just
Yeah.
take it from here.
Yeah, just you brought up a great point with the Billy Graham story. Is one point that we want to drive home is just keep the relationship intact. Don't let our children's temporary insanity tear our relationship apart. And you were just talking about, our children can make decisions that are hurting them, that hurt us. And I think we have a tendency as parents, we just want to save them from pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a bad place to be in. But I had a conversation with my cousin where he brought up a great point. And he said, that's every parent. Every parent gets to this point where we say, I know more than you. I've been through that already. I can save you that pain. And yet our parents tried to do the same thing for us and their parents before them. And sort of, we look generationally, it doesn't work. And he also brought up a great point that all of the things that I went through, all of the bad decisions I made, all of my temporary insanity, God used it to build who I am today. And so, to some degree, we need to trust God and say, we're going to parent them, we're going to give them an advice. We're not going to be surprised sometimes when they don't take it, when they make poor decisions, but we entrust them to God that He'll turn those things to their good. He's got them taken care of. Another thing I think that's a point that I thought about in reflecting about our conversation today was I never heard the reasons why. I brought that up in my story. Why is my temporary insanity a problem? Is it just that I'm a bad kid? And I think if we can, early on when our children are young, start to explain sort of why and how their sin hurts them, how it can be detrimental to their relationships here on earth and their relationship with the Father, maybe connecting the why and the how for them can help them make some better decisions as they grow and get older. Showing grace and mercy to our children and having a response. I say it 1 Corinthians 13 response, but if you want to look up that scripture, it just talks about a definition of love from God's definition. It's patient, it's kind, not jealous, boastful, proud, or rude, not demanding its own way, not irritable, keeping no record of wrongs, never losing faith, always being hopeful, enduring through every circumstance. Man, that's a tough standard, but we want to shoot for that standard with our kids, right? We love them. This is what God's definition of love is. If we can get this right sometimes, it will help them believe that there is a God who created them, who has this type of perfect love for them. My last big point here at Dad Nation, we love to talk about superpowers, right? Dad
Yep.
superpowers. And so I think this is one. If we can model God's definition of love to our children and help them trust that that's really possible, then they can have this relationship that they can seek with a God who they can believe that the promises of his word are true. And so I really do think that's another dad superpower.
So good. Lots here. Feel like we could just keep going.
Yes.
We are gonna keep going next month with this, but we're gonna kind of turn the focus more on us as dads. Today we've been talking more about how do we handle this temporary insanity when our children go temporarily insane. How do we handle it? We're going to talk next month about what happens when we go temporarily insane, because it still happens.
Yes.
Because we are not perfect. And how do we handle that? And there's this, especially when this happens, when our kids are younger in their formative years, we can call it the plunge from going from hero to human.
Right.
And then how do we handle that with our kids when they see dad's not maybe the perfect hero that I've always thought him to be, and he's disappointed me, he's hurt me with a decision or a choice that he's made. How do we deal with that? And I think it'll be, another great conversation to talk about, because we are as guilty of being temporarily insane as our kids. So that's what we'll prepare for and talk about next month, and look forward to that. So thanks, dads, for being a part of another Dad Nation episode. You can follow Dad Camp. If you want to know more about Dad Camp, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We have a YouTube channel you can check out with all kinds of videos and information that you can watch as well. You can also view the Dad Nation podcast on the YouTube channel as well. If you are listening in Texas and Nebraska and Montana, we still have some room left for our Dad Camp events there in August and September. So let's go, dads of those 3 states. We want to see you there. We want to fill those events up. Check out more on dadcamp.org for how you register in those 3 states. So as we always say, dads, you have what it takes to be the strong father that God has called you to be and created you to be. So go do whatever it takes to be that strong dad. We will look forward to seeing you again next month for another edition of the Dad Nation podcast. Take care.